And I'd like to thank you and the ranking member both for holding this important hearing today on legislation that we are considering. And I'd like to talk about two of those pieces of legislation, a bill to designate Illibutt Creek in Skagit County as a wild and scenic river, and a bill to clarify that the Park Service's authority to stock fish in certain high mountain lakes in the North Cascades National Park. First, I'd like to talk. The second bill the committee is considering would clarify that the Park Service authority to allow the Park Service the authority for fishing stock in the North Cascades National Park. The North Cascades contains over 245 mountain lakes, of which 91 have been historically stocked with fish. In some cases, the stocking of fish in these lakes dates back to the 1800s. For decades, volunteers working with the state of Washington have stocked trout in a number of lakes in this area and under careful construction management plans written by the Park Service biologists. In addition, congressional consideration of the creation of the North Cascades National Park indicated that fish stocking would continue. The legislation creating the parks even identified fishing as an important recreational use. When questions were raised about environmental impacts of fish stocking, the Park Service prepared an EIS on the fisheries in the mountain lakes, and this included a 12-year scientific research project conducted by Oregon State University. The preferred alternative selected in the Park Service final record of decision is to allow continued fish stocking in 42 lakes where the agency has concluded there would be no adverse impact on native ecosystems. In this report, the Park Service also requested explicit authority to allow fish stocking to continue within the park. So I have heard from many of my constituents in and around the North Cascades National Park, and they want the fish stocking to continue. Many tourists visit the park for its scenic beauty as well as its fishing opportunities, making the fish stocking an important component of our National Cascades National Park system throughout the state of Washington and to our economy. I've also heard from constituents who are concerned about the potential impacts of continued fish stocking, so I'm looking forward to hearing from the Park Service on how allowing the fish stocking would work and allow for no adverse impacts on our native ecosystem. So I thank the chairman for having both of these bills on the docket. I look forward to hearing the testimony of the Department of Interior and others on these issues.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. HR2430 would direct the Secretary of Interior to continue stocking fish in certain lakes in North Cascades National Park, Ross Lake National Recreation Area, and Lake Chelan National Recreation Area. The preferred alternative in the park's 2008 fishery management plan would allow stocking of non-reproducing fish at low densities to continue in up to 42 lakes, subject to additional monitoring. However, this action requires legislation. The department does not oppose this bill, but we would like to work with the committee on amendments to the bill. The National Park Service is interested in ensuring that the legislation is guided by science and an understanding of the impact that such policies would have on park resources. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my statement. I'd be pleased to answer questions that you or members of the committee may have.
Ask Mr. Wink about the fish stocking issue, if I could. Obviously, after 12 years of studying, research found that native or functionally sterile fish with a low population density in certain carefully selected lakes would not lead to impairment at the Park Service resources. So if resources would not be impaired by limiting fish stocking in certain high lake mountains, does that mean there are no ecological impacts of stocking fish in these lakes?
No, I think just we believe that it doesn't rise to the level of impairment, but there are impacts certainly of introducing a non-native, non-native. They were fishless lakes. So by introducing fish within these lakes, there is an effect on the other the system itself that the fish has been introduced to. But we don't believe that in the lakes that we said could be stocked that it raises to the level of impairment.
The record of decision had its preferred alternative known as Alternative B. Does the Park Service headquarters support implementation of Alternative B as described in the recent record of decision?
We support it with the recognition that we would need legislation in order to implement it.
And why did the Park Service change the policy here, the management approach in the 1980s?
I think it was a determination in terms of natural areas and trying to maintain and preserve natural areas in their natural state to the greatest extent possible.
Okay, thank you. Mr.
As presently written, the bill would direct the Park Service to authorize the stocking of fish in the identified parks. If the bill were amended to make that authority discretionary instead of mandatory, would the Park Service still be able to continue with the fish stocking program, or do you need an explicit override of park management laws?
Discretionary, we would still be able to stock the lakes, sir.
I was curious. I was visiting with the staff about Rocky Mountain National Park and whether the questions that are being asked here would also apply to Rocky Mountain National Park. I've fished in some of the high lakes there. I don't know if they've been stocked. I imagine some of them have been. I just draw that to your attention and my attention, perhaps for a future conversation.
Thank you, Senator. It has been the policy of the National Park Service to not stock fish in lakes for, and I can't give you the exact date, for quite a period of time to try to return the natural systems. This case at North Cascades is an exception.
It's an exception. Well, I appreciate that clarification. I do know that well-meaning anglers and backcountry enthusiasts have, through the decades, carried fish, more appropriately fingerlings, to some of these high lakes. I know of certain cases too where those pilots who own airplanes have been convinced to make flyovers and stock lakes in that same way. And I finally appreciate the way in which the Park Service has kept faith with the National Environmental Policy Act and with the Organic Act of the Park Service. So these conversations will obviously continue, and we'll grapple with the right outcomes and the right approaches. So thank you.
Thank you.